Good evening. Welcome to the Cosy Library at Langford Manor. My name is Theo Langford. I am the librarian here, and every week I sit down in one of the manor's many rooms and tell you a sleep story. If you are new to the library, I am very glad you found your way here. If you have been coming for a while, welcome back. Pull the blankets a little closer. Let the evening do its work. I should tell you a little about where I am tonight. Because the manor has many rooms, and I do not always tell these stories from the same one. The library itself is on the ground floor, a long room with oak shelves from floor to ceiling on 3 of its 4 walls, a stone fireplace at the far end, and a Persian rug in deep reds and golds that I've always liked to look at when I'm thinking. The library is where I return most evenings. It is in every sense home. But the manor has other rooms, and on certain evenings a particular room calls to you, and it would be wrong to ignore it. Tonight I've come to the winter garden. The winter garden is a glass-roofed room on the manor's east side, connected to the main corridor by a short passage that passes the old linen cupboard and comes out through a pair of arched doors into a space that always surprises me a little, no matter how many times I walk into it. The glass above holds the sky, whatever the sky is doing at the time, and the iron arches that support it are painted the deep, almost black green that Victorian ironwork turns when it has been kept up properly over a long period of time. Along the walls, ferns, some of them very old, their fronds the deep green of plants that have been growing as us in the same shelter position for decades. Stone pathways between the planted beds, worn smooth, slightly mossy at the edges. Wooden benches, at intervals, the wood grey and dry. Comfortable, in the uncomplicated way of things that have been sat on for a very long time. Tonight, the glass above is dark, and the frost is on it. I can see it at the edges of the panes, where it has formed, in the last hour, the cold outside pressing against the warmth inside and leaving its signature. The winter garden is heated from below, through the old iron pipes that run under the stone paths, and that make a very faint periodic sound of metal expanding and contracting that I have always found rather soothing. The ferns are brilliant green in this light, against the dark glass and the frost, and the whole room has the quality I wanted for tonight, which is winter held at a distance, cold visible, warmth certain, the ideal conditions for a story about snow. Before I begin, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely hope you will leave your answer in the comments, because I read every one of them, and they are one of my favourite parts of doing this. Tonight's question's this: what does the first snowfall of the year look like, where you live? Not the weather report version, the real version. What do you see from your window, or hear when you step outside, or smell when the air changes just before it starts? I'm asking because I think snow is one of those things that is entirely different depending on where you are in the world when it arrives, and I find that endlessly interesting. So tell me, I will be in the comments. Now, let me take you somewhere cold outside and completely warm within, a stone cabin in the mountains, in the spruce forest, on the first evening of the first real snow of the year. Come and settle. The fire is already laid. The hot chocolate is on. The snow began at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 6 it had covered everything. You arrived before it started, just before 3. In fact, turning off the valley road onto the forest track in the last pale light of the early January afternoon, the sky already the particular white grey that means snow is coming and has been preparing itself since morning. The track through the spruce forest is 1 kilometre long and unpaved. The surface, a compacted mixture of gravel and old pine needles that is firm in the dry months and requires care in the wet, but which in hard winter, frost becomes reliable, again in a different way. Frozen solid, the surface taking tyre marks, like a pressed seal. Your car knows this track now. 3 Januaries of it. You drive slowly, not from uncertainty, but from habit, from the preference you have formed for arriving at the cabin, the unhurried way, letting the forest close behind you, gradually, as the valley road disappears and the trees thicken on either side, and the light changes from open afternoon light to the greener, more filtered light of the forest interior. Clara was there when you pulled in. She always is. She times it well, arrives 30 minutes before you, makes sure the stove is ready, and the lamp above the kitchen table is lit, and the cabin is, as she puts it, welcoming. She has a good word for it. It is a good word for it. She was standing at the cabin door when you parked and climbed out, and she said, as she always says, in exactly the same tone each year, the tone of a person checking that the world is in order, she said, "You look well." And you said, "So do you, Clara." And she nodded, satisfied, and turned back inside and put the kettle on. The tea she makes is the same as she has made every year in this kitchen, strong, with a small amount of milk that mountain people seem to understand is correct for a first cup in a cold place. The milk barely colouring the tea doing the work itself. She sat at the kitchen table with you for 20 minutes and talked about the winter, about her substitute teaching, about the old man on the farm at the valley's head who had finally agreed to let his grandson take over the difficult field, about nothing very much and everything that mattered in the valley's small and careful life. Then she saw the sky through the window and stood up and said, "It will snow before 5. She was right by an hour. She showed you the notebook before she left. Soft cover, brown, her handwriting inside the front. And she said, "The cabin deserves a record." Then she went down the track to her car, and you heard the engine going back toward the town, and then the forest was quiet, and the cabin was yours. The cabin sits at the edge of the spruce forest, 300 metres above the valley floor, on a shelf of land that the mountain offers here, as if making a deliberate concession to the idea of human habitation. Below the shelf, the slope continues, steeply down through the trees to the valley road, and the small town at the valley's bottom, its lights just visible from the cabin's front window on clear evenings, as a warm, scattered cluster in the dark. Above the shelf, the mountain continues upward into the high places where nothing is built and nothing needs to be. The rock faces and the snow fields and the ridge lines that in summer are walked by people with good boots and careful intentions. The cabin is precisely between these two worlds. Not the town, not the high mountain, but the middle place. The place where the forest is thick and the slope is gentle. And a building can stand for 100 years if it is built from the right stone and maintained by someone who understands what winter requires. Clara Voss built the cabin in the sense that she commissioned it in the winter of 1991 on a piece of land that had belonged to her family since her grandfather's time. She was 34 that year, a primary school teacher in the valley town, practical and direct in the way of people who spend their working lives with children and have learned that clarity is a form of kindness. She had inherited the land from her father and had spent 2 years deciding what to do with it before concluding that the right thing was a cabin, somewhere to come in summer and autumn, somewhere to lend to people she trusted through the winter months, somewhere that would be, over time, a place with its own accumulated character and warmth. The builder she hired was an old man from the next valley who had been building mountain structures for 40 years and who looked at the shelf of land and the spruce forest and nodded in the deliberate, slow way of someone who has seen many pieces of land and knows immediately which ones are good. He said it was a good place. He built it well. The stone walls are thick and the roof is steep, and the fireplace draws perfectly in every wind direction, which is the real test of a mountain fireplace and the thing that separates the builders who understand mountain weather from those who merely understand building. Clara is 67 now, and she still comes in July and September, and she still lends the cabin through the winter to people she trusts. You're one of them. You have been coming for 3 years, always in January, always for the same 2 weeks, always arriving on the first Sunday afternoon of the month, with the same bag and the same box of provisions, and the same sense of something releasing in the chest as you turn off the valley road onto the forest track and the town disappears behind you. Clara meets you there each year on that first afternoon to hand over the key and to run through the stove and the wood store and the pipe above the sink that can freeze in sustained cold and must be left dripping overnight when the temperature drops below -10. She makes you tea in the cabin's kitchen on a small gas ring, and she asks if you are well, and you say you are, and she nods as if she already knew but was checking. And then she goes back down the forest track to her car, and the drive to the town and her own house there. The small, well-kept house, 3 streets from the school, where she still substitute teaches 2 days a week, because she finds, at 67, that she is not entirely ready to stop. This year she left something. On the kitchen table, next to the tea things, there was a small notebook, soft cover, the brown of old leather, and inside the front cover, in her precise school teacher's hand, for the log. Write down what you notice. The snow, the birds, the temperature, what the mountain does in January. I've been meaning to start this for years. Clara, you picked the notebook up and turned it over in your hands and put it on the shelf above the kitchen window, next to the jar of dried rosemary and the small wooden bird that has been on that shelf for as long as you have been coming. And you thought, yes, tomorrow. For now, the fire. The fire in the main room of the cabin is laid. When you arrive, Clara does this as a matter of course. The kindling and the smaller logs are ranged over the paper in the precise pyramid that lights first time, every time, the knowledge of how to build a mountain fire. Well being one of the things she has carried since childhood, since the winters of her own family's cabin, going since the time when her father showed her the pyramid and explained that a fire is not made by putting wood near a flame, but by giving the flame somewhere to go. You touch a match to the paper at the base, and the kindling catches within 30 seconds, and the smaller logs begin their conversation with the flame above the kindling. And the fire is going, is established, is already throwing its warmth into the stone room with the intention of a fire that knows it will be burning all evening and has organised itself accordingly. The stove in the cabin's main room is a cast iron one, old, its surface the black of iron that has been seasoned by decades of fires. The door closes with a satisfying weight, the metal on metal sound of something made to last and lasting. Through the small glass panel in the door, glass darkened slightly by previous fires, but still clear enough, the flame is visible inside, the kindling burning down to its orange embers as the logs above it take and begin their longer, slower burn. The warmth begins to reach the room's stone walls within 20 minutes. By the time the hot chocolate is made, it has reached the wooden floor, the boards expanding very slightly in the heat, the cabin making its first small sounds of warming, the tick of the stove, the faint creak of the floor, the old timber of the roof beams, doing what they have done every winter for 30 odd years, which is to accept the warmth and give it back to the room, slowly and generously, through the whole of the evening and the night. The hot chocolate. There is a particular way to make it in a mountain cabin on the first snow evening of January, and the way is this: full fat milk, not too much, in the small saucepan on the gas ring, brought to just below a simmer, so that a skin does not form, but the milk is fully hot. Good dark chocolate, not cocoa powder, but actual chocolate, broken from the bar that you have brought specifically for this purpose, wrapped in its foil in the side pocket of your bag, where it will not be confused with any of the other provisions. The chocolate goes into the hot milk and is stirred with a wooden spoon that has lived in the kitchen drawer since at least your first visit, and possibly much longer. The spoon having acquired over the years the particular dark stain of a spoon that has stirred hot chocolate many times. A pinch of cinnamon, a small amount of ground cloves, less than you might think, the cloves being emphatic and easily overdone. The result goes into the large mug with the blue rim that is, you have decided, your mug when you are here, the mug that you always choose from the cabinet above the sink, and that makes the hot chocolate taste slightly better than it would in any other vessel, which is not logical, but is nonetheless true. You carry the mug to the chair by the window. This is the other ritual of the first evening. The chair, the mug, the window, the snow. The chair is a deep one, upholstered in a dark green wool that is worn to a pleasant softness at the armrests. and it faces the cabin's main window, which looks northwest over the shelf of land to the edge of the forest, and beyond the forest's edge to the open slope above. The snow has been falling for 2 hours now, and it has done what serious snow always does, which is to transform the landscape, not gradually, but completely, replacing the known shapes of the shelf and the tree line with a single white surface that is the same colour from the forest floor to the sky. The light and the snow and the cloud all merged into one pale, soft, entirely still presence beyond the glass. The spruce trees at the forest edge are carrying the snow on their upper branches in the way that spruce trees carry snow. The branches horizontal, slightly downward sloping at their tips, holding the snow in long white lines above the dark of the needles below. The effect from the cabin window is of the forest wearing white, the individual trees distinct and decorated, the space between them dark, and the whole edge of the forest a line between the open whiteness of the shelf and the sheltered dark of the interior, where the snow has not reached the ground because the canopy above is too dense for it. A tawny owl will be in that dark interior somewhere. You heard it last year, on the third night, calling from deep in the spruce, the sound coming through the cabin's thick walls as a muffled version of itself, recognisable but softened, the forest filtering the owl's voice the way it filters everything else, keeping the essential and removing the unnecessary. The silence of a snow evening. It is a specific silence, not the silence of an empty room, or the silence that follows a loud noise, but the active, performing silence of a landscape that has had its sound absorbed. Snow absorbs sound. The physics of it have to do with the surface area and the air trapped between the crystals, and the way that porous surfaces interrupt the transmission of sound waves. But the physics are not what you notice when you are sitting in the chair with your hot chocolate, looking at the snow-covered shelf in the failing light. What you notice is that the mountain has become quiet in a way it is not when the snow is absent, and that this quiet is a quality rather than a mere absence, a presence of something rather than the removal of something else. The silence as a texture, like the wool of the chair's armrests, like the weight of the blankets you have pulled over your legs, like the warmth of the cabin that holds you, while the white and the quiet hold the mountain outside. The mountain hare. You see it just before the light goes entirely, a shape moving across the shelf from right to left, unhurried. The white of its winter coat almost perfect against the white of the snow, but not quite. The slight difference in texture and the movement itself making it visible. It stops. It looks toward the cabin in the way that mountain hares look at things they are not sure about, completely still, ears forward, the whole body attending. Then it moves again, reaches the forest edge, and disappears into the dark between the trees with the complete, silent thoroughness of a wild animal that was always going there and has now arrived. You hold very still while it crosses the shelf, as if your stillness might help it feel safer, which it probably does not, but which feels correct regardless. When it is gone, you write it in Clara's notebook. 4:12 p.m. Hare, white, crossed the shelf, east to west, entered the forest, unhurried. The evening deepens. The gas lamp above the kitchen table, lit at 5 when the daylight failed, makes its warm circle. The fire in the stove has settled from its initial enthusiasm to the steady, deep burn of established logs. The flames visible through the glass door as a lower, more orange thing than they were an hour ago. The heat they produce, if anything, more pervasive and more certain. The stove's surface is warm enough to rest a hand on briefly, the iron holding the fire's heat, and releasing it into the room in the slow, democratic way of cast iron. The whole surface of the stove, a radiator, the warmth spreading outward from it in all directions and meeting the stone walls and being held there and sent back. The cabin's interior approaching the temperature of a room that has been properly heated for several hours, which is different from a room that has been quickly heated, the difference being in the quality of the warmth. This warmth goes into the walls and comes back from them, is present in the floor and the ceiling and the chair and the wool blanket. It's the warmth of the whole room, rather than just the warmth near the stove. Supper is a simple thing. You brought what you always bring for the first evening. A good soup in a sealed container, made at home the day before, and carried here, still cold in the bag, heated now in the saucepan, that also lives in the kitchen cabinet, alongside the mug, with the blue rim and the wooden spoon. Lentil soup with cumin and a piece of dark bread from the bakery in the valley town where you stopped on the way through. The bakery whose bread you buy specifically because it is the right bread for a mountain cabin in January. Dense, slightly sour, the kind that keeps for 3 days and improves on the second day. The soup and the bread at the kitchen table with the gas lamp above it and the fire in the main room and the snow outside the window and the notebook open at its first entry. 4:12 p.m. Hare, white. This is the first evening of January at the cabin. This is the cabin at its most itself. Clara's notebook grows through the evening. After supper, you take it back to the chair and add 6:30 p.m. Temperature outside, -7. Snow still falling. Fine now, the large flakes of the early evening having given way to something smaller and more persistent. Fire, good. Wood store, full. The owl has not called yet. You think about what Clara said years ago, in that first year. The cabin knows you by the third